Amen. Okay. So, how about the praise team? They did a great job, didn't they? And I saw another Holy Spirit thing this morning because they had no idea what I'm about to preach. But they sang that song, King of Love, talk to the King of Love, my shepherd is. Well, I'm starting a series on the 23rd Psalm. The Lord is my shepherd. And fit in so well. So if you have your Bibles, turn to Psalms 23 and verse 1. Psalms 23 and verse 1. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Can you all say that with me? The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Now see, if you recite those verses with me for the next several weeks, we'll have the whole 23rd Psalm memorized. All right, that'll be great. That'll help all the teachers getting ready for VBS. All right, so VBS is only 2 weeks away. Doesn't seem like it, but it's here. And we need to be ready. The theme is Emerald Crossing. It has a little bit of an Irish flavor, and over the next couple of weeks, I think you'll probably see sheep and different things showing up around in the building as they start decorating, getting ready for VBS. So be on the lookout for those things. And it's based on the 23rd Psalm. That's the key thing that we need to think about. It's one of the most cherished psalms in the Bible. I mean, you hear it a lot of times at funerals because people love it so much. They want it done for their funeral. But if you ask people to recite something that's a favorite passage, a lot of times it's the 23rd Psalm, right? People love the 23rd Psalm. But there's a lot of stuff packed in those little 6 verses. And so today we're only going to look at the first verse. As we think about this psalm. And there's something we need to notice about this psalm. We're compared to sheep. Now, folks, let me tell you, that's not a compliment. All right? That's not a compliment. Why is it not a compliment? Because sheep are some of the dumbest and dirtiest animals that God created. And He calls us sheep. Think about that. Isaiah says in Isaiah 53:6, we all like sheep have gone astray. That's not a good thing. We've gone astray. We're on the level with the stupid, dumb sheep. Because sheep will do that. They'll tend to stray sometimes. And when they do, they get into trouble. Sheep, if they lay down on their back, will never get up. If they get caught in a wire fence, they can't get out. If they step into water, they'll drown. Because that wool gets heavy and they can't get out and they'll drown. Sheep are weak, helpless, dirty, and dumb. And God says we're like sheep. So that means we got a lot to work on. All right? Jesus, when He looked on the people, He had compassion on them because He said they are like sheep without a shepherd. See, the only way sheep are going to make it is the shepherd taking care of them. So all sheep need a shepherd. So we're like sheep. That means we need a shepherd. We need a shepherd. All right? So we will start this series and try to unpack all the meaning out of the psalm we can get. And today, there's 2 things we want to focus on in this first verse. All right? Who is the shepherd? And what does I shall not want really mean? Okay? So the Lord is my shepherd. The Lord is my shepherd. Now, the Hebrew word in the psalm, the Lord is my shepherd, is the word for Jehovah or Yahweh, whichever way you want to say it. The Hebrews didn't say it. They always said the Lord. They wouldn't say his name because they didn't want to take his name in vain. So they refused to say his name. In fact, when they wrote it, they took the vowels out of his name so you couldn't pronounce it. So we're not even sure that Jehovah or Yahweh is exactly right. We just put some vowels in there to make it a word that we could pronounce. But the Lord is my shepherd. What the word means is the self-existent, eternal one. That's what it means. The self-existent, eternal one. The one that created everything. The one that sustains everything. The one who deserves our praise. Okay? But when we come to the New Testament, in John chapter 10 and verse 11, Jesus said, I am the good shepherd. I am the good shepherd. Now, by making that statement, Jesus is saying, I am the self-existent, eternal one. I am God. I am the good shepherd. And you see, it starts off with I am. When Moses asked for God's name, what was it? I am. I am. Jesus is saying, I am the good shepherd, but I am God. I am God. And he makes it clear in John chapter 10 that no other God would do. In verse 8, he says, all who came before me are thieves and robbers, but the sheep did not hear them. In verses 12 and 13, he goes on to say, he who is a hired hand or not a shepherd, he who is not the owner of the sheep, sees the wolf coming and leaves the sheep and flees. And the wolf snatches them and scatters them. He flees because he's a hired hand and he's not concerned about the sheep. So Jesus is saying anybody else that claims to be God, that claims to be the shepherd, won't do. So Allah won't do. Buddha won't do. Confucius won't do. There's only one shepherd. And that shepherd is Jesus. All right? Now, what does a shepherd do for us? Well, at the end of verse 11, the good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. But go on and look at verse 17 and 18. For this reason, the Father loves me, because I lay down my life so that I may take it again. No one is taking it away from me, but I lay it down on my own initiative. I have authority to lay it down, and I have authority to take it up again. Jesus taught plainly many times about his death, his burial, and his resurrection. And talking about being the good shepherd, here again, he clearly talks about his death, his burial, and his resurrection. Notice what he says. I lay it down, and no one takes it from me. Jesus was in control of every moment of his life, even to the point of his death. He was in control of that whole thing. None of that happened until he was ready for it to happen. He laid down his own life. But notice what he says. He laid it down. But he also has authority to take it up again. What happened when they put Jesus on the cross? They put him in a tomb after he died. And 3 days later, The stone was rolled away, and Jesus came out of the tomb, very much alive, proving everything that he had said was true. So he is the good shepherd. Now, the question comes up, yeah, but how can I trust his words? How can I trust his words? In the book of Deuteronomy, it tells us this about a prophet. You may say in your heart, how will we know the word which the Lord has not spoken? When a prophet speaks in the name of the Lord, if the thing does not come about or come true, that is the thing which the Lord has not spoken. So Jesus said, I have authority to lay down my own life. No one takes it from me. I lay it down, and I have authority to take it up again. Talking about his death, burial, and resurrection. The death, the burial, and the resurrection happened. How do we know it's true? Because the things he said came true. So every promise he's ever made will come true, because his word is the word from God. He is the shepherd. He is the only one that we need to follow. In fact, he said, no man comes to the Father except through me. The only way to get to the Father, the only way to get to heaven is going through Jesus Christ. And I know that sounds exclusive. It is. But it's what Jesus said. We all have to lay down our life for him, because he laid down his life for us. So the Lord is my shepherd. Jesus is my shepherd. But then there's the second part of that phrase. I shall not want. I shall not want. You know, what does it mean? I shall not want. I mean, we do want, right? You know, we want things. You know, we're going to want to eat when we get out of church, right? We're going to want to do that. We want things. What does it mean, I shall not want? Well, several versions translate it differently. The New American Standard, which I'm using, says I do not want. The Living Bible says I have everything I need. No, that puts a little bit different spin on it. I have everything I need. All right? The New Jerusalem Bible says I lack nothing. And Peterson's translation says I don't need anything. So let's think about those phrases. I do not want. I have everything I need. I lack nothing. I don't need anything. Because the Lord is my shepherd. What it means is if you make Jesus your shepherd, he is going to supply all your needs. That's what it means. But sometimes we miss that point. Max Lucado tells a story about a man who had a severe financial catastrophe, and he lost everything financially. He lost it all. So he goes to the preacher, and he tells the preacher, "Preacher, I've lost everything." And the preacher looked at him and said, "Oh, I'm sorry you lost your character." He said, "No, I didn't lose my character, but I lost everything." So the preacher says, "Oh, I'm sorry you lost your faith." "No, preacher, I still believe in God. I didn't lose my faith, but I lost everything." And he said to him, the preacher said to him, "I'm sorry you lost your salvation." "No, preacher, I didn't lose my salvation." And then the preacher looked at him and said, "Well, if you got your character and you got your faith and you got your salvation, seems like to me you've got everything you need." You see, sometimes We think we need so many things financially. We forget the things that really are important. Okay? We forget things that are eternal. Because financially, what we have here on this earth, number one, doesn't belong to us anyway. It belongs to God. But number two, you can't take it with you. I mean, you don't see a hearse going behind a U-Haul going behind a hearse, do you? That doesn't happen. You can't take it with you. Not going. I don't care if you put it in a casket. It's not going. It's going in the ground. That's all it's going to do. You can't take things from this earth with you. So, as important as they may seem to us, they really aren't that important. But what's important is that I have good character. Is that I have faith in that good shepherd. And it's that I have my salvation. That's eternal. And Jesus said, lay up for yourself where moth and rust cannot destroy. He's talking about heaven. We put our hope and our things in heaven. We do what we can to advance the kingdom of God. Those are the things that are important. And we do those things, God will make sure we have what we need here on this earth. So we need to remember what really is important. But we still haven't got down to the crux of I shall not want. Because we do want. So, what is it? And I think one of the key things that needs to be thought about right here is contentment. Are you content with what you do have? That's an important question. Are you content with what you do have? Listen to these words by Jason Lehman. It was spring, but it was summer I wanted. The warm days and the great outdoors. It was summer, but it was fall I wanted. The colorful leaves and the cool, dry air. It was fall, but it was winter I wanted. The beautiful snow and the joy of the holiday season. It was winter, but it was spring I wanted. The warmth and the blossoming of nature. I was a child, but it was adulthood I wanted. The freedom and the respect. I was 20, but it was 30 I wanted. To be mature and sophisticated. I was middle-aged, but it was 20 I wanted. The youth and the free spirit. I was retired, but it was middle age I wanted. The presence of mind without limitations. My life was over, and I never got what I wanted. Aren't we a lot like that? Think about, I hear it all the time. It's spring. Some people complain about the cool nights. It's spring. It's supposed to be that way. Right? People say, I can't wait for summer. Guess what? It's going to be 90 degrees today, tomorrow, Wednesday. And I know what I'm going to hear. People are going to say, I wish fall would get here. Right? You hear that all the time. We're never content with anything. And that's exactly the point the psalmist is trying to drive home. I shall not want. I need to learn to be content just the way things are. Sometimes that's hard, right? But listen to Paul in Philippians chapter 4. Not that I speak from want, for I have learned to be content in whatever circumstance I am. I know how to get along with humble means, and I also know how to live in prosperity. And in every circumstance, I have learned the secret of being filled and going hungry, of having abundance and suffering need. Okay? So he says, I know what it is to have plenty. I know what it is to have nothing. But in each situation, he said, I've learned to be content. Content. Think about that word. How important that word is. The psalmist says in 34:9, "Oh, fear the Lord, you saints, for those who fear the Lord have no lack." Do you get that? If you fear the Lord, you will have everything you need. Now, that doesn't mean you might not live in poverty. All right? That may not mean that you might miss a meal or two. But what it means is that God is going to supply your needs. Not everything you want, but everything you need. All right? Everything you need. Matthew chapter 6, verse 33. Seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be added to you. You put God first. You make the Lord your shepherd first. And he will make sure you have everything you need. You know, go back to sheep and how dumb they are. If you put sheep in one place, say you take an acre lot and you put sheep there and you just let them graze, they will clean that acre to the point it'd be hard to get anything to grow on it again. And the shepherd knows that. The shepherd has to make sure they move from place to place. They don't just stay in one place. So the grass they eat here today will be good another day. And move them on, to give them plenty of room to expand around so they're not stuck in one little place. The shepherd has to make sure their needs are met. The shepherd has to make sure they didn't lay down and they can't get up. The shepherd has to make sure they're not caught in a fence and can't get out. The shepherd has to make sure that they didn't jump in some water and can't get out of it, so they drown. The shepherd has to make sure every single need of that sheep is met. And we're sheep. Don't forget. And the Lord is making sure every single need we have is met. He's taking care of us. Because he's taking care of us, I don't need anything except the shepherd. That's what I need. The shepherd. Nothing else. Long ago, there lived a king. His name was Mahendra. He lived in this country. And every year in this capital, he held a competition. And people would come from everywhere to compete in this competition. And when they were over, they gave some kind of great prize. But this one year, the king realized he needed a royal minister to help his country with various things. And so what he decided was that he would have a competition to pick who would be that royal master. So what he did to prepare for that competition, he built a big, beautiful garden. And in this garden, he found some valuable treasures, and he placed them throughout the garden for the contestants to find. And the rule was that the contestants needed to find the most valuable prize and bring it to the king. So the day came for the competition, and people came from all over thousands of people came to compete for this position as the royal minister. And people would go through the garden and they'd find a prize and they'd bring it to the king, and they had to explain to the king why this prize was the most valuable. Well, towards the end of the competition, a young man came riding up on a horse and got off and stood before the king. And the king said, "Why did you show up and not bring anything? Why did you come empty-handed?" And the young man said, "Oh, king, I'm not empty-handed. I brought you the most valuable prize." And the king said, "I don't see a prize." And the young man said, "King, you built a most beautiful garden. And I've been through the garden, and I've seen some valuable prizes you've placed throughout the garden, and I've beheld the beauty of this garden, and it is beautiful. Everything is. And I bring you the most valuable gift." And the king says, "What is it?" And he said, "I am satisfied." The king said, "You're satisfied? What do you mean you're satisfied?" He said, "I don't need anything else. I am content with who I am and what I have to offer you, and I bring you the most valuable prize." Who do you think the king made the royal master, the royal minister? The young man that was satisfied and content. And he made a great royal master that helped the kingdom tremendously. Think about it. Do you know the shepherd? Do you know the shepherd? Important question. Because if you do, you can have contentment. And when you find contentment, you find out life's a whole lot better. Not trying to get ahead of the Joneses or the Smiths all the time. Not trying to live to be something that you're really not, but be content with what God made you and what God's blessed you with. Be content. But how do you know if you have the shepherd? Well, Jesus said, "My sheep hear my voice, and I know them, and they follow me." My dad raised sheep. I've watched sheep as I was growing up. You know what? Dad would always say when I went with him to feed the sheep, "Stay in the truck until I get the sheep up." You know why? Because if I went in the sheep yard first, they would scatter. But Dad could walk in the sheep yard and he could say one word, and that word was Sheba. He always had a pet sheep he named Sheba. And he would walk in the sheep yard and he would say, "Sheba!" Sheba would come running. And all the others would follow because they heard Dad's voice. And they followed Dad wherever he went. Well, then it didn't matter if I got out of the truck because they were following Dad wherever Dad went because he was the shepherd. And they knew him. And they trusted him. So if he would let me come up, they would figure that was okay. Do you know the shepherd? Do you trust the shepherd? Do you hear his voice? He's saying, "Behold, I stand at the door and knock." He wants anybody that doesn't know him to come and know him. Do you know the shepherd? Are you following the shepherd? Okay? That's the next thing. Are you really following the shepherd? Because there's a reward for following the shepherd. When the chief shepherd appears, you will receive the unfading crown of glory. Jesus is going to reward us for following him by taking us to live with him for all eternity. Do you have that promise? Is there a decision you need to make for Christ while we stand and while we sing?